Welcome to Nightly Peace of Mind tonight. We step gently into the moonlit garden of Gethsemane. The air is cool. The leaves whisper softly in the still night. And Jesus, tired, yet composed, kneels in quiet prayer. You are here too, sitting beneath an olive tree, heart slowed by the rhythm of night, watching as the Prince of Peace embraces the hush of sorrow with steady breath. You probably won't survive this without feeling absurdly sleepy halfway through. That's okay. That's the point. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you watching from? And what time is it in your part of the world? Share it in the comments so we can create this peaceful space together. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The garden is darker than you imagined, lit only by starlight and the flickering shimmer of Jerusalem on the hill nearby. You sit on a soft patch of grass as Jesus walks a short distance ahead, his robe brushing over the ground, his breathing steady but deep. The disciples nearby are dozing, but you are awake. You feel the weight in the air, not fear, but something heavier, surrender. Jesus pauses near a stone and kneels slowly. His prayer isn't loud. It's not shouted or dramatic. It's soft, personal. Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done. The words drift toward you, tender and fierce all at once. You feel them settle into your chest like warm rain on dry earth. And there it is, the teaching tucked inside the stillness, that peace isn't the absence of struggle, but the willingness to release it. Even Jesus, in his quiet hour, doesn't resist what is coming. He trusts it into God's hands. And in that moment, there is rest. Not the kind found in a hammock or under cozy blankets, but the kind that steadies a trembling soul. You breathe in and wonder, what if surrender is not giving up, but giving over? In the quiet of the garden, a cool breeze touches your face. You think of something small, a story told by early desert Christians about an old monk who lived alone in a cave. He was asked once why he never left, why he didn't return to town or build a bigger life. He smiled and simply said, "Because God walks slowly, and I want to walk with him." You smile too. Maybe stillness is how we learn to match God's pace. The leaves shift softly overhead. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the rustling branches sound like whispers. The noise of the world, the emails, the unfinished lists, the ache of something unresolved fades behind the quiet of the olive trees. You imagine your worries held in a clay jar, gently placed beside you, not smashed or destroyed, just set down, safe. Jesus rises slowly. His face is calm, though streaked with quiet sweat. He turns and looks toward the disciples, who have fallen asleep again. His gaze isn't angry, it's tender, like a parent watching over a tired child. You catch it too, a softness that tells you he understands. He always has. The night is thick now, not threatening, just full. The kind of fullness that makes you feel small in the best way, like lying under a starlit sky and remembering that you're not responsible for spinning the earth. You remember a question whispered in your heart: can surrender bring peace, even when nothing around you changes? You don't answer it yet. Just let it rest beside you, like a friend, not in a hurry. Jesus returns to his spot near the stone. This time, he doesn't kneel. He sits, cross-legged, calm. His fingers move slowly along the fabric of his robe, as if grounding himself in the moment. You mirror him. You sit straighter. Let your shoulders drop. You notice your breathing slower now, quieter. There's no miracle happening here, not like in other stories. No healing, no multiplying bread, no walking on water. Just presence, just Jesus and you and the night. And maybe that's the real miracle, that God chooses to be with us in quiet places, not just glorious ones. The candle of moonlight lays a silvery trail across the grass. Somewhere nearby, a bird stirs. You notice how Jesus doesn't try to fix the silence. He simply lives inside it. Maybe that's the invitation. You let your thoughts drift again to the old monk and his cave. He once carved 3 words into the stone wall by his bed: be, wait, trust. No explanations, no follow-ups. Just a gentle permission to stop striving. As the hour grows deeper, you begin to feel the pull of rest, not just sleep, but a spiritual slowing, a permission to let go of carrying what isn't yours to fix. You're not required to hold every answer, solve every problem, or be perfectly strong, because even Jesus, Son of God, healer of the broken light of the world, needed to pause in a garden under the moonlight, to pray, to weep, to breathe. You lean back slightly, palms resting gently on the ground. The soil is cool, steady, timeless. You let the earth remind you of something older than worry, that God has been here from the beginning, and he is not leaving now, and neither are you. The garden fades quietly behind you, and now you find yourself beside a gently rocking boat on the Sea of Galilee. The air is thick with salt and silence. You hear the water lapping against the hull, the creak of wooden planks adjusting to the calm. Above, stars shimmer across a velvet sky, and a soft breeze carries the scent of cedar nets and wet ropes. Jesus is here too, lying near the back of the boat, head on a cushion, fast asleep. You sit nearby, your knees drawn to your chest, listening. It's strange how even in this stillness, something in your heart feels restless. Like the waves that gently rock the boat, there's movement inside you that refuses to be calmed. Then, as if the night decided it had a story to tell, clouds gather slowly over the horizon. A distant rumble rolls across the water. Nothing wild, yet just a warning. You glance over at Jesus, still sleeping. Your breath quickens just a little. Your hands tighten on the edge of the boat. It doesn't take much for the mind to spiral, does it? One gust of uncertainty, and suddenly you're forecasting disaster. It's easy to believe the storm before it even arrives. Then rain. Soft at first, like curious fingers tapping the sea. The disciples begin to stir, murmuring to one another, then panicking. Voices rise. We're going to drown. One yells. Another shakes. Jesus, his voice cracking. Teacher, don't you care if we drown? You watch, half expecting Jesus to leap up and shout something grand. But he doesn't. He opens his eyes, slowly, sits up, and looks at the wind, like someone remembering a forgotten friend. And then he speaks. Peace, be still. The wind listens. The waves lower their shoulders. The rain steps back. Everything stops, including you. You look at him, utterly awake now, utterly calm. And you realize something. The storm wasn't the problem. The panic was. The wind didn't frighten Jesus, but the fear of those he loved stirred his heart. And maybe you think that's still true now. Sometimes it's not about the storm stopping. It's about remembering who is in the boat with you. Jesus turns to the disciples, not with anger, but with quiet curiosity. Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? And then he looks to you, not with blame, never with blame, but with a question that lands deeper than it sounds. Why are you afraid? You sit with the question, not answering, just letting it breathe. Because maybe the real miracle here isn't the silencing of the sea, but that peace can fall even in the midst of fear. You let your gaze drift over the now still water. Reflections of stars ripple across the surface like spilled pearls. The boat drifts slightly. Jesus lies back down again, and this time you feel no need to panic. You stay right where you are, listening to the gentle creak of the wood. And then, from the folds of memory, you recall a parable, one seldom told, but rich in imagery. A tale passed among the early believers about a woman who carried an empty bowl with her wherever she traveled. People would laugh, of course. Why carry an empty bowl? One day, she met a hungry child, and without thinking, she reached into her bowl and pulled out bread. Then another came, and another, and somehow the bowl never ran dry. When asked how it worked, she smiled and said, "Because I carry the emptiness that trusts to be filled." You blink. A gust of peace stirs within you, like a wind that isn't loud, but sure. Perhaps that's what Jesus teaches in the boat. Not just that he can calm storms, but that when we are empty of control, empty of certainty, empty of frantic striving, we are finally open to be filled. You glance around the quiet boat, the sleeping friends, the waking stars, and you ask yourself gently, can I carry an empty bowl with trust? You think about your own storms, the ones no one sees, the kind that aren't made of thunder, but of unread messages, half-finished prayers, relationships that fray at the edge. You feel them inside you, swirling. But tonight, something has shifted, because Jesus didn't stop the storm out of panic. He did it out of peace. Peace that was already there, sleeping in the back of the boat. And maybe you have that kind of peace, too, hidden, but present. You lie down across from him, head resting near the edge of the boat. The wood is rough and familiar beneath your cheek. You let your eyes drift closed, not because the sea is calm now, but because you've remembered who you're with as you settle. One more image drifts softly into your thoughts. It's a whisper of a legend told by an old fisherman's widow. She said Jesus once sat beside her late husband during a long fishing night, not catching much. They spoke few words, but as dawn broke, Jesus told him, "The fish aren't the gift, the waiting is." And they laughed like old friends. You smile. Maybe you're learning to laugh like that too. So here you are. The boat doesn't need to move tonight. The sea doesn't need to part. It's enough to rest in this moment here, beside the sleeping Christ, with the hush of peace wrapped gently around your shoulders. You don't need to fix anything tonight. You don't need to figure it all out. Just breathe. Just be here. Just rest. The night stretches forward, unbroken, as the waves of Galilee fade behind you. You walk now along a quiet hillside just before dawn. The sky wears its pre-light hues, blue melting into silver, with a faint brush of gold blooming on the edge of the world. You walk slowly, following footprints in the dew-soaked grass. They are fresh, yet ancient. Jesus walks ahead. He moves with the ease of one familiar with stillness. His steps are soft, deliberate. No crowd presses in. No questions swirl around him. No demands for healing or explanation. Just the hush of earth waking beneath his feet. You find a rock and sit. The air is cool on your cheeks. The scent of thyme and wild grasses carries on the breeze. Somewhere in the brush, a lark begins its morning hymn. Jesus kneels a few paces away, his robe brushing over a patch of clover. His hands fold quietly. His eyes close. And once again, you witness something tender, something powerful. Jesus praying alone. There's no grand sermon here, no thunder from heaven, no angel choirs, just breath and silence and presence. You shift your weight gently on the stone and watch. There's a rhythm to it, a pattern. You've seen it before the crowds, before the miracles, before the days began to unravel, like thread pulled from a tunic. Jesus always begins in solitude, and you begin to realize this is no retreat from the world. It's how he meets it. Very early in the morning, the Gospel of Mark says, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. You whisper that verse to yourself, letting each word rest on your tongue like honey. Very early, while it was still dark, he went to pray. He rises often before the sun does, before the questions, the needs, the expectations. Maybe it's because in the dark quiet, he can hear the Father's voice more clearly. Maybe it's because rest and purpose are sisters, both found in stillness. You glance at your own thoughts, the ones usually running ahead of you. Plans, worries, timelines, notifications. But here in this hush, they feel quieter, like children who've fallen asleep in the back seat of a long drive home. You think of something an old woman once said after a church potluck. She had white hair, pinned tightly, and hands that looked like they'd held generations. The secret to staying close to God, she said over her coffee, is waking up with him, not just talking to him when things fall apart. You didn't understand it then, but now with Jesus on the hillside, you do. You breathe in, deep, slow. You let the coolness settle in your lungs like a blessing. Then a story floats to mind. A quiet tale told by believers long ago about a boy who once followed Jesus in secret, sneaking behind him as he climbed a hillside before dawn. He wanted to see what the Son of God said when no one was watching. But when he arrived, he found Jesus saying nothing, just sitting, listening, weeping, smiling. And the boy thought, Maybe the holiest words are the ones we don't speak. You sit longer, mirroring the stillness, not trying to feel anything, just being here. The wind brushes your cheek, like a friend reminding you. God's voice is not always a roar. It's often a breath. Jesus eventually opens his eyes. He doesn't look surprised to see you, just content. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. His peace reaches you like a ripple from the center of a pond, subtle but sure. You close your eyes too. Not to imitate him, but because something inside you finally says, you can rest here. There's no race today, no performance, no demand to be on, just the slow grace of morning and the whisper that you too are beloved, even when you do nothing but sit on a rock in the early light. You think again about how Jesus chooses. This chooses quiet, not to escape, but to be filled. His strength doesn't come from sleep or strategy or the approval of the crowds. It comes from mornings like this, when he lets the Father wrap him in silence. And you wonder sadly, what would my life look like if I began each day not with noise, but with stillness, not with a to-do list, but with a prayer as simple as, here I am. The question hangs in the air, not heavy, not urgent, just open. You lift your gaze toward the horizon. The first rays of sun stretch out, touching the hilltops with liquid gold. Jesus stands, dusting off his robe. He looks toward the towns in the distance, the needs, the healings, the people waiting. But there is no rush in him, no tension. He has rooted himself here first, and so will you. There's a quiet power in choosing to start from stillness. You realize that this time alone with God, this quiet doesn't take away from your purpose. It prepares you for it. It makes your presence more true, your voice more gentle, your eyes more kind. You smile, almost surprised by how good stillness feels when you let it be enough. And as you walk slowly down the hill behind Jesus, feet soft in the grass, you carry that silence with you, not as an absence of noise, but as a fullness of peace. You may not remember every word he said, but you'll remember this. He rose before the sun to find rest before the day, to meet love before the need, to begin with God before anything else began. And so can you. The hillside gives way to groves of olive trees, their silver green leaves rustling softly in the wind. You walk quietly along a narrow footpath, the morning sun now stretching over your shoulders, casting golden light through the branches. The scent of crushed herbs, maybe rosemary, maybe thyme, clings to the air like a blessing you didn't ask for, but deeply needed. Jesus walks ahead of you, his pace slow and steady, He pauses near the base of a tall olive tree and places his hand on the trunk as though greeting an old friend. You pause, too, watching. There is something sacred about trees, something that remembers more than we do. And Jesus seems to know that. He sits beneath the tree and gestures for you to come close. The soil beneath you is soft, warm from the rising sun, and carries the faint fragrance of earth waking up. You sit cross-legged beside him, and the quiet stretches out like a smooth river. Then Jesus begins to speak, not loudly, not with a crowd gathered, but just to you. And he doesn't start with a command. He starts with a picture. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, he says, rolling one between his fingers. Though it is the smallest of all seeds, when it grows, it becomes the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree so that birds come and perch in its branches. He lets the seed fall to the ground, and you watch it disappear into the soil. There's no fanfare in the story, just a seed, just time, just trust. You feel the quiet lesson wrap itself around your heart. God works in the small, in the slow, in the still. You don't have to be grand to be holy. You don't have to bloom overnight to be beloved. You just have to be planted and willing. Jesus leans back against the trunk. Consider the lilies, he adds, gazing toward the nearby field. They do not labor or spin yet. Not even Solomon, in all his splendor, was dressed like one of these. You follow his gaze and see them, small white blooms scattered in the grass, fragile and fierce at the same time. Not hurrying, not striving, just growing where they are. You wonder, what would it look like to live like that? Not rushed, not constantly proving, just deeply rooted in being. You think of the noise you carry, the urge to hustle, to fix, to always answer with something clever or useful. But here, under the olive tree, that noise is distant. What grows instead is permission to slow down, to be small, to trust that God doesn't overlook the quiet souls. You glance at Jesus. He's watching the birds now, 2 of them, flitting from branch to branch. He smiles, and you sense something. This is how he sees the world, not as a place to conquer, but a garden to walk through gently. You begin to feel the beauty of that too. A small breeze stirs the leaves. The olive tree creaks slightly, a sound like an ancient sigh. And then a memory surfaces, an old Christian legend from the early church told in whispers among persecuted believers. It was said that there was a woman named Talitha, a widow, who kept a single potted fig tree in her home in Antioch. She would tend to it daily, singing psalms to it, softly, though it bore no fruit for years. When asked why she kept it, she'd smile and say, "It reminds me that faith is not measured by the harvest, but by the tending." One spring, after many quiet seasons, the tree bloomed unexpectedly, and she wept. You carry her image now, right alongside the mustard seed and the lilies. Simple faith, quiet faith, persistent love, all of it growing without noise. Jesus doesn't rush the conversation. He just lets the stories settle like seeds into soft soil. He glances toward you, not to test you, not to quiz you, but with the kind of gaze that sees your heart, even when you haven't spoken. And then he asks gently, "Do you believe something small in you could grow into something beautiful, even if no one notices but God?" You don't rush to answer. You just let the question rest in you, like sunlight. After a while, Jesus stands and dusts off his robe. You rise too, stretching your limbs slowly, like branches waking after a long night. The olive grove feels softer now, more familiar, like a sanctuary without walls. As you begin walking again, you glance down and notice the mustard seed he dropped earlier. It's gone from sight, already nestled into the soil. It will grow, you think, not because anyone hurries it, not because it shouts, but because that's what seeds do when they're trusted to the earth. You carry that thought like a blessing tucked behind your ear. Maybe you are the seed. Maybe you're the soil. Maybe you're both. But either way, something sacred is growing, and it doesn't need to be loud to be real. The breeze picks up slightly as you leave the olive grove. The branches wave gently behind you, like friends saying farewell. And you whisper in your heart, "Let me be like the lily, the tree, the seed, still small and full of you." The path winds gently toward a quiet house nestled in the village of Bethany. You smell the faint aroma of warm bread drifting through the open window, mingling with the scent of figs ripening on the nearby trees. The sun has climbed just high enough to warm your shoulders, but not enough to press. It's the kind of morning that feels like a slow exhale. You walk through the door, and the first thing you notice is the peace. It's not grand or overwhelming. It's the peace of simple things. The worn clay jug in the corner, the fresh linen folded over the table, the echo of a broom moving across the floor. And at the center of it all is Jesus seated calmly and Mary sitting at his feet. You take a quiet seat beside her. Martha moves through the house with steady hands, arranging dishes, checking pots, adjusting the placement of fruit in a bowl, as though trying to make everything perfect for the one she loves. She glances now and then at Mary, a furrow forming between her brows. You watch Jesus closely. He says nothing yet, just listens. Mary eyes Ra and still sits as though time has paused. Her hands rest on her lap. Her breath is slow. She says nothing either, but somehow her silence is loud in the most peaceful way. And finally, Martha speaks. She doesn't mean to sound upset, but her voice carries urgency. Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. You brace for a rebuke, but it doesn't come. Instead, Jesus answers with tenderness. He turns toward Martha and says, Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but only one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken from her. The words settle like soft rain. You feel them in your chest. Only one thing is necessary. You turn this over in your mind, your heart. What is the one thing? Is it presence? Is it attention? Is it stillness? It is all of that and something more. It's love made still. You glance at Mary again. She hasn't moved. Her stillness is her devotion. And you think, how often are you, Martha, busy, good-hearted, intentional, yet fraying a little from trying too hard? How often do you serve from a place of stress instead of stillness? You recall a saying you once heard from an old Christian nun who lived in a small coastal convent. God does not shout over your sweeping. He waits until you sit. And here in Bethany, that truth glows. There's a quiet story told by early Christians about a woman who baked bread for pilgrims. She'd shape the loaves in silence, whispering prayers into the dough. But once a week, she would sit with an empty bowl in the chapel. Just sit. No bread, no kneading, no offering. When asked why, she said, even bread knows when to rise without being touched. You smile. You feel like the dough some days pushed, stretched, handled. But maybe what you need is to sit still long enough to rise in spirit. Jesus doesn't scold Martha. He loves her. He knows her heart. But he invites her to pause, to remember that being with him is more important than doing for him. And that's hard, isn't it? Especially in a world where worth often feels measured by output, by achievement, by usefulness. But here in this quiet house, the rules are different. Here being is enough. You wonder gently, have I confused doing good with being present? Have I missed the better portion because I was busy offering my own? Mary doesn't need much. No elaborate prayers, no checklist. She simply shows up, attentive, open, quiet, and maybe that's what the one necessary thing really is. The willingness to sit, even when everything around you whispers, you should be moving. You take a deep breath and feel the stillness settle in your bones. Not laziness, not avoidance, but holy stillness, chosen, kept. Like Mary, the day drifts on in gentle rhythm. Martha continues her work, slower now, less frenzied. Jesus' presence changes even that. He doesn't divide the sisters. He gently realigns them, and you too are being realigned, not away from activity, but toward intention. The light in the room shifts slightly. Shadows fall across the floor like stripes of peace. You hear the clink of a spoon against a clay bowl, the low hum of a kettle. Simple things, sacred in their simplicity. And in this space, you're reminded of something deeper. You are loved, not for your usefulness, but for your presence. You are cherished, not for what you carry, but for simply coming close. No need to earn your way to the feet of Jesus. Just come, and when you do, like Mary, nothing will be taken from you. So tonight or tomorrow, when the world pulls you into motion again, when laundry piles, emails shout, expectations weigh heavy, remember the room in Bethany. Remember the soft voice of Jesus and the peace that comes not from completing everything, but from choosing the better part. And maybe, just maybe, before reaching for the next task, you'll pause long enough to whisper in your heart, only one thing is necessary, and you'll sit, even if just for a moment. You find yourself once again walking with Jesus, not through a city or over crowded roads, but far from it, into what the scriptures call a lonely place. The path is quiet, narrow, edged with tall grass and wild shrubs. You hear your own footsteps, the brush of your tunic against your legs, and Jesus breathing gently just ahead. There is something beautifully intentional about the way he moves when he wants to be alone. Not rushed, not avoiding anyone, just choosing solitude, like one chooses a deep breath before speaking. You glance behind you. Far in the distance, you see the faint shape of people gathering. Crowds. They're always coming. They bring their sick, their questions, their needs. They come for healing, for hope, for bread. And Jesus never turns them away. But before that, before them he retreats. You walk a little closer. You want to ask him why he chooses this rhythm, why with all the needs pressing in, he still steps away. But he turns to you before you can ask, as though he's read your thoughts. And he just smiles. Come with me, he says softly. By yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. You nod. Of course, this is the rhythm of Jesus, the holy rhythm. Not all give, not all retreat, but the sacred inhale before the holy exhale. You sit down beside him in a patch of shade. The sky is wide and open. The breeze carries the scent of dry grass and something sweet, maybe wild honey nearby. You let your shoulders relax. The silence isn't empty here. It's full of breath, full of space. And then you remember this moment echoes one told in the Gospel of Mark. After the disciples returned from their mission, full of stories and exhaustion, Jesus doesn't launch them into the next task. He says, "Come away with me. Rest." Even for them, even for the ones carrying the message of God, rest wasn't optional. It was sacred. You let that soak in. Rest is not a reward. It is a rhythm. You glance over and see Jesus reclining slightly, also looking up at the sky, like someone who has memorized the clouds. You imitate him, letting your eyes trace the drift of white fluff across the pale blue. He doesn't seem eager to move, and neither are you. You think of all the times you've treated rest like a prize, something earned after enough emails, chores, kindnesses, spiritual effort. But Jesus doesn't work like that. He invites you to rest before you think you've earned it. Because love isn't earned. And peace doesn't come from productivity. It comes from presence. You hear a gentle buzzing, maybe a bee. You smile and close your eyes, letting it all be what it is. And just then, a soft story stirs in your memory. It was told by a traveling monk from the desert. He spoke of a small bird that sat on a shepherd's staff each morning before the sun rose. The bird didn't sing, didn't fly, just sat. "She trusts the day will come," he said. So she waits in silence. The monk called her the bird of the quiet hour. You wonder if you've been that bird lately. Or maybe you've forgotten how to sit still on the staff. Jesus shifts beside you, stretching his legs. He's still watching the sky. Sometimes he says almost to himself, "You need to be away from the crowd to remember who you are." You nod. Not because you fully understand, but because your soul does. And isn't that the quiet fear sometimes? That we become only what others need us to be. That in the loudness of doing and pleasing, we lose track of the still center within. But here in this holy place, you are reminded before the miracles, before the callings, before the crowds. You are loved. You sit with that truth like a stone warming in the sun, and you wonder gently, is rest simply remembering who I am? When no one is watching, Jesus stands, slowly, brushes the dust from his robe, and looks toward the hills in the distance. "They'll find us soon," he says softly, almost like a song. You know he'll greet them with compassion. He always does. But this moment, this stillness, is what prepares him for that. It fills his soul before he pours it out. And you begin to understand you can't give what you haven't received. You can't heal others if you're running on empty. Even Jesus, perfect and divine, took time to be alone. How could you expect to do less? You rise with him. Your feet press gently into the earth. You feel lighter, not because the world has changed, but because you've found your place in it again. The crowd will come, the questions will return, the tasks will find you, but now you walk back toward them, not from exhaustion, but from peace. And maybe tomorrow, or the next day, when your spirit grows thin, you'll remember this path. You'll find your way again to the quiet place, not to escape, but to breathe, to rest, to be known, and to be with the one who reminds you over and over that love was never earned, only received. The quiet place begins to fade behind you, and now the day unfolds with a soft, golden light. You walk alongside Jesus again, this time, through a narrow street where dust curls gently underfoot. The air is warm, the kind of warmth that feels healing, not heavy. People begin to gather again, not loudly, but steadily drawn by something more than curiosity. You can feel it too, that pull toward hope. And then, through the crowd, she comes. You barely notice her at first. She moves like water through stone, flowing between the press of bodies. Quiet, deliberate, unseen. A woman, and not in posture, but in spirit. She doesn't cry out. She doesn't even speak. She just reaches, one hand stretches toward the edge of Jesus' robe. Not his face, not his hand, just the hem, just a thread, and then everything stops. Jesus pauses mid-step, as though time has shifted. The crowd quiets. Birds overhead continue chirping unaware. He turns slowly, eyes scanning, not with suspicion, but with knowing. Who touched me? The question is strange. So many have pressed in. But this was different. This was touch with intention, with faith. The woman trembles now. She steps forward. You see her fully for the first time. Her eyes are tired but determined. Her fingers still hover near the hem of his robe, as if afraid the miracle might unravel if she lets go. And then she says it. It was me. Her voice is fragile, but not weak. You can feel the courage it took to speak. She tells her story, 12 years of bleeding, of doctors, of being unclean, of being invisible. But this moment, this touch was different. Jesus listens. He doesn't interrupt. He doesn't rush. And when she finishes, he says the most extraordinary thing in the most ordinary way. Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace. You feel those words ripple through the air like a stone dropped gently in still water. Go in peace. Not just be healed, but go in peace. You hold on to that. You look at her, this woman who reached for healing, not with noise, but with a whisper of belief. And you wonder, when was the last time I reached for something sacred, with nothing but quiet hope? It didn't take a speech. It didn't require approval. It took a moment of bold stillness, a decision that even the edge of grace is enough to change everything. You remember something you once read from a small monastery tucked away in a mountain village. The hem of Christ's robe is always within reach of those who kneel. It wasn't signed, just scrawled into the margin of an old prayer book. You glance down at your own hands. They're open now, resting gently on your lap. You don't need to stretch or strain. Just stay open. Just believe enough to reach even quietly. Jesus looks at the woman not as a miracle to display, but as a daughter who needed to be seen. Because isn't that what we really crave sometimes? Not just healing, but to be noticed in our reaching. You feel that in your bones, and as the crowd slowly begins to move again, you stay close to Jesus. You've seen what quiet faith looks like. It's not always clean. It's not always confident, but it's real. And it moves him as you walk. Another story floats to your mind, one told by a woman named Helena, a quiet servant of the church in the 3rd century. She once tended a garden near a Roman villa, growing herbs and flowers for the poor. It was said she had nothing of her own yet. Every morning, she knelt beside the stone wall and whispered, "Let me touch the edge of your kindness today, Lord." People would come for food, but they left with more because somehow her hands smelled like heaven. You smile softly. Some people carry peace like that, not because they shout it, but because they reach for it every morning. And you wonder again, do I reach for God only when desperate? Or do I believe He walks beside me always, with healing in the hem of His robe? There's no shame in reaching. The woman in the crowd reminds you of that. There's no shame in needing, only trust. Trust that even in the press of people, in the noise of the world, in the long stretch of pain, God sees you, and He turns toward you, and He says, "Go in peace." The sun dips slightly now. The day has grown long, but you are not weary. You are steady, still. You walk with Jesus through the narrow lanes of life, not expecting grand gestures, but open to small mercies. And that hem, so close, always close, is never out of reach. The path leads you away from the village, now past the echo of footsteps and laughter, past the memory of healing, and into the countryside again. The landscape opens wide. Soft green hills roll like waves across the land, and nestled in the valley below is a still, glimmering body of water, calm as glass, untouched by even the faintest breeze. You walk beside Jesus, and the silence between you is comforting, like a shared understanding that words aren't needed here. Let's sit, he says quietly, pointing to a patch of shaded grass near the water's edge. You do, and for a moment, it's just the two of you, and the lake, and the sky, and the breeze. Jesus gazes out over the still water. He makes me lie down in green pastures, he says softly. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. Psalm 23, you whisper the rest quietly in your heart, the words as familiar as breath. You look over and see him smiling, not at you, but at the memory, at the shepherd, at the peace of it. Still waters, he says again. You don't have to swim across them. You don't have to stir them. You just have to be near them. You look down at the lake and realize how much effort you've made in life to stay afloat, to keep going, to always be on. But here by the water, you're not asked to strive, only to lie down. Jesus reclines on the grass, arms folded behind his head. His eyes close, not out of exhaustion, but rest. It's different. A chosen quiet, a shared trust. You follow his lead, and the grass cradles you gently. The shepherd restores the soul not by commanding effort, but by inviting peace. You feel something shift inside you, subtle as a stream changing direction. There's healing in this stillness, not dramatic, not immediate, but deep. As you rest, a story from early Christian tradition wanders into your thoughts, a gentle tale nearly forgotten now. It was said that a shepherd named Eustace would hum psalms to his sheep at twilight. One night, he found a lost lamb tangled in thorns, frightened and trembling. Instead of rushing to free it, he sat beside it in silence, humming Psalm 23, until the lamb calmed enough to be touched. Peace first, he would say, then rescue. You think of how Jesus has often met you, not yanking you from the thorns, but sitting with you, humming peace until you're ready to rise. The wind rustles the trees nearby, leaves swaying gently like soft applause from heaven, and you ask yourself, have I let the shepherd lead me beside still waters? Or have I tried to carry my peace like a burden? You glance at Jesus. His eyes are still closed, but his face is serene, at home, as if this stillness is not a pause in the journey, but part of the destination itself. You let yourself lean into that idea that rest isn't the interruption of your life, but the center of it. The shepherd doesn't restore you after your work. He restores you to continue. Restoration is not a luxury. It's sacred necessity. You close your eyes. There's no pressure here. Nothing needs solving. Nothing needs performing. Just lying in the grass, breathing with the rhythm of the earth beside the one who knows your name. and still leads you gently. You imagine the sheep of the psalm, not bold, not brave, not particularly clever, just loved, just followed, just trusted. And isn't that freeing? That your value in God's eyes was never about how clever you were, how strong. It's always been about this. Are you willing to let Him lead? You open your eyes again and see a bird land near the water. It dips its beak in, then flies away satisfied. No chaos, no hoarding, just enough. You whisper to yourself, "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want." And you realize, for this moment at least, you don't want. Because you are here, you are seen, you are known, you are being led. And so you let the quiet take root. You let the stillness become something that lives inside you. Not just something you visit when you're tired. You rest in the rhythm of Psalm 23, not just as poetry, but as promise. And beside the still water with the Good Shepherd resting nearby, you find something you didn't know you were missing. A peace that doesn't ask for anything in return. Just your presence, just your trust, just you. The still waters gradually slip behind you as you and Jesus begin to walk uphill. The path narrows and rises, winding through dry shrubs and stones scattered like breadcrumbs from a story too old to remember. There's less color here, fewer blooms, more quiet. The kind of quiet that isn't peaceful at first, but challenging. The kind that listens for your thoughts. You walk in silence beside Him, both of you taking slow, steady steps. And then you see it ahead, a cave, tucked into the side of the hill, half shaded from the late afternoon sun. It's not large, but its mouth opens wide, like it's waiting for something or someone. Jesus pauses near the entrance and turns to you, the faintest smile in His eyes. This is where Elijah heard the whisper. He says quietly. You step inside. It's cool, dim, the kind of place where sound dies gently and thoughts echo before vanishing. Jesus doesn't speak right away, and neither do you. You both sit. The stone is hard beneath you, but grounding. Elijah expected thunder, he says softly. But God wasn't in the thunder. He's not looking at you, just speaking into the hush. He waited for the wind to shake the mountain. But God wasn't in the wind either. You nod. You remember this story. Elijah, alone and afraid, had fled to a cave like this one, needing answers, desperate for God to show up loudly. But then Jesus continues. There came a gentle whisper. You don't speak, because the cave, the quiet, and the whisper, it all feels close. Too close. Like something you've been needing, maybe even avoiding. You close your eyes, and in the silence, you don't hear words, but you feel presence, like a warm weight on your chest, like light you can't see, but still know is there. The gentle whisper of God doesn't crash in. It waits. And when you're still enough, it meets you where noise never could. Jesus leans back against the cave wall. "You know," he says almost playfully, "most people expect God to shout, but shouting's for urgency. Whispering is for closeness." You smile at that because it's true. You whisper to those who are near. You don't shout into someone's ear. You lean in. You draw close. And maybe that's why silence unnerves so many of us. Because it's not empty. It's intimate. You sit with that thought, letting the stillness in the cave teach you, just as it did Elijah, just as it does Jesus. A story comes to mind, one passed along by early desert hermits. There was a young monk who asked his elder, "Why does God not speak to me?" The elder took him to a dry, empty well and dropped a pebble in. They waited in silence until the echo returned. There the elder said, "That is how silence works. You must wait long enough for the echo to come back." You think of all the times you've fled silence because it didn't answer quickly, because it didn't feel productive. But now you wonder, was God whispering all along, and I just wasn't quiet enough to hear it? Jesus doesn't push you to figure it all out. He doesn't rush you out of the cave. He simply waits with you, and in his presence, the silence becomes sacred. Not the kind that isolates, but the kind that gathers you up, holds you gently, shows you what matters without saying a word. The wind rustles faintly outside. You notice the way it doesn't enter the cave, not fully, just brushes the entrance as if honoring the quiet inside. Jesus glances over at you, his voice low. "You don't need to find me in fire and fury. I'm here in the breath, in the space between heartbeats, in the pauses you're afraid to take." You inhale slowly, exhale even slower. You realize you've been longing not for noise, but for presence. Not for answers, but for assurance. And here, in the hush of the cave with the Messiah himself beside you, you've found it. Not in thunder, not in wind, not in earthquake, but in whisper. You turn to him and whisper your own question. Why do you speak so softly? He smiles, the corners of his eyes creasing. So you'll lean closer, and you do. You lean closer to him, to the silence, to the stillness that is not a void, but a voice. The cave no longer feels cold or hard. It feels like a sanctuary carved by patience. You rest your back against the stone wall and let yourself be quiet, not as withdrawal, but as communion. You are not alone here. You never were. As the last of the light fades from the cave entrance, you whisper something you hadn't planned to say aloud. "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." And you wait, not for fire, not for fury, just for that gentle, unmistakable whisper of peace. The hush of the cave still lingers as you walk back into open air. The wind has quieted the sun, now low on the horizon. You follow Jesus along a winding path down the hillside, the dust soft beneath your feet, the sky brushed in amber and lavender. The stillness has changed you. You feel quieter inside, not empty, just no longer in a hurry. But not everyone feels that way. You find them again, his disciples, and they are asleep. You pause. You know this moment. You've read it, heard it. But seeing it with your own eyes makes it feel different. You're in Gethsemane again. The garden is dim. The moon has risen, casting a pale light over the trees. Jesus steps away to pray, just as he did before, and you sit beside the three, Peter, James, and John. Their heads are drooping. Their eyes struggle to stay open, and it hits you differently now. This isn't a story about failure. It's a story about being human. Jesus returns to find them sleeping. He looks at them, not with fury, not with shame, but with compassion that feels like a sigh. Could you not keep watch with me for 1 hour? He says gently. He turns to you, not angry, just honest, and you feel it, that quiet ache of being seen in your weakness and still loved. Jesus returns to his prayer, but not before adding, "The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." It's not a scolding, it's a truth. You sit for a while, watching the sleeping disciples, their chests rising and falling in uneven rhythm. They tried. They were tired. So are you some nights, and you realize he doesn't need your perfection. He asks for your presence, even if your eyes close, even if you nod off, even if your prayers are whispered one moment and forgotten the next. He keeps praying anyway. He doesn't storm off. He doesn't withdraw his love. He just continues. And you see something profound here. Jesus knew they would fall asleep, yet he still invited them, still trusted them with his sorrow, still wanted them near in his hour of agony. That's love. There's an old story passed down by a 4th century nun named Amma Theodora. She told of a young novice who fell asleep during night prayers every evening, no matter how hard he tried. Other monks scolded him, but she simply placed a blanket over him and said, "God listens to even your dreams." Years later, the novice said those nights were when he first learned what grace felt like. You think about that. How often have you fallen asleep with a prayer half formed on your lips, ashamed you couldn't stay awake? But maybe even your sleep, honest, unguarded, tired, is still wrapped in sacredness. You watch Jesus praying again. His words are dubbed strained, full of sorrow, yet surrendered. "Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." Even in anguish, he rests his trust in God. You hear a soft snore from one of the disciples and almost smile, not from mockery, but from recognition. You've been there. You are there. You know what it is to want to be present, but find yourself exhausted. Jesus returns to them again. They are asleep again, and yet he stays. He stays near. He prays while they rest. He watches while they cannot. He carries what they cannot hold. And maybe, just maybe, that's the whole point. You don't have to hold it all together. Sometimes you're the one praying. Sometimes you're the one asleep under the tree. But he doesn't leave either. You feel a question stir gently in your chest. Is grace still? Grace when I'm too tired to reach for it? Yes, you think. Because grace is not something you earn by staying awake. It is something he gives again and again while you sleep. You lean back against a tree trunk. The bark is rough against your spine, grounding you. Your eyes begin to close, not because you're giving up, but because you trust. Jesus is still praying, and tonight, maybe that's enough. To know that while you rest, whether in stillness or sleep, he keeps watch. He keeps loving. He keeps whispering peace. You don't need to strive. You don't need to pretend. Even when you're too tired to stay awake, he calls you friend. So you close your eyes, not from failure, but from faith. And in the hush of the garden, as leaves whisper above, and Jesus kneels again in prayer, you drift gently into the arms of grace. Morning arrives gently, the sky unfolding in soft hues of gold and peach. The memory of Gethsemane still clings to your skin like dew, quiet, heavy, sacred. You walk now with Jesus along a quiet path, your feet moving slowly over the soft press of earth. The village lies ahead, and with it, life again. People needs voices, but for now, you are between moments. Jesus is quiet, not somber, not tired, simply full, as if he's carrying something invisible, yet good. You round a bend in the path and suddenly hear a memory coming to life. Laughter, children, the rustle of robes, the warm murmur of a crowd. You come upon a place. You recognize the fields where 5,000 were fed. It's quieter now. The people have gone home. The grass lies flattened in patches where families once sat. Bits of leftover bread still cling to the edges of the stones, like echoes of the miracle. You walk through it slowly. You remember what happened here. The baskets, the blessing, the breaking, the multiplying, the wide-eyed wonder of people who realized that with Jesus, even hunger has no final say. But what lingers now isn't the miracle. It's what Jesus did after. He left, not with fanfare, not with a victory lap. He withdrew to the mountain to pray. You turn to him now, walking quietly beside you, and ask the question with your eyes why. He stops, looks out across the empty field, and says with a calm voice, "Even joy needs silence to settle into the soul." You sit beside him on a low stone. The wind picks up softly, brushing the tall grasses into a gentle sway. And you understand, even after success, after goodness, Jesus chose stillness. Not because he was depleted, but because even holy things can become heavy if not given space to rest. You remember the verse from John's Gospel. After the people saw the sign Jesus performed, they began to say, "Surely this is the prophet." But Jesus, knowing they intended to come and make him king by force, withdrew again to a mountain by himself. You hadn't noticed that part before. He walked away, not because he didn't love them, not because he feared their praise, but because he refused to let noise, even the noise of celebration, replace his deeper connection with the Father. You take that in slowly, like bread broken just for you. Not every miracle needs a parade. Some just need prayer. There's a legend passed down by early Christians in Asia Minor about a woman named Maris who would feed the poor in secret. She would disappear into the woods for hours afterward. When asked why, she said, "The praise of others is sweet, but it sticks to the soul like honey. I go to the trees so the wind can wash it off." You smile. There's truth in that. Even beautiful moments need solitude to stay sacred. You look back across the hillside where thousands once sat. You can almost hear them, still laughing, asking for seconds, amazed by the fullness. But the quiet that follows is no less holy. Jesus stands now and steps toward a narrow trail winding up the side of the mountain. He gestures for you to follow. You climb slowly, higher. The air grows thinner, but lighter too. At the top, he sits. No crowd, no questions, just sky, just God, just the stillness after the miracle. And you ask yourself, do I let joy rest? Or do I chase the next good thing before the last one has even settled? You sit beside him, not trying to speak, not trying to pray, just being, because sometimes the most faithful response to God's goodness is not more doing, but quiet gratitude, still thankfulness. You watch a hawk circle lazily overhead. Even it doesn't rush. You close your eyes and let the memory of the bread linger. The way he gave thanks. The way he fed everyone, not with scarcity, but with abundance. And then he walked away. You feel the invitation echoing through that choice. Let your soul breathe, even after the blessing. You think of all the times you've kept moving, even after God moved. Maybe out of fear, maybe out of habit. But today, you choose differently. You let the joy rest. You let the miracle sit in your bones without having to post it prove it or even explain it, because Jesus didn't perform for applause. He withdrew for alignment, and that's what you're doing now. The sun climbs higher, warming the stone beneath you. Birds sing from unseen trees down the slope, and you sit with the one who doesn't rush you forward. There's no next thing now, only this thing, the stillness after the miracle, the pause after the provision, the breath before you return. And in that holy breath, you find peace. The mountain gently fades behind you, replaced by the dusty footpaths of a town you don't recognize at first. The streets are narrow, sun-washed, and quiet. Not many people are out, and those who are move with the kind of deliberate stillness that suggests something has just happened or is about to. Jesus walks slowly beside you, the hem of his robe just brushing the ground. You notice how it moves, how it gathers a little dust, how it's been touched by places, by people, by pain even. You think of the woman who reached out to him. And now, here in this quiet square, you feel the energy shift. A group of men drags someone forward, not with care, with force. A woman wrapped in shame like a heavy cloak is pushed into the center of the space. She doesn't look up. Her face is hidden, her posture collapsed inward, like a person trying to become invisible. They say she was caught in the act. Someone says, voice sharpened with accusation. You feel the tension ripple through the air, and then the voices turn not to her, but to him. Teacher. They ask this woman was caught in adultery. The law commands us to stone such women. What do you say? It's a trap. You know it. They know it. But Jesus, he says nothing. Instead, he kneels right there, in the dust, beside the woman, beside the noise. He lowers himself without a word, and he begins to write with his finger in the sand. No one knows what he writes. It doesn't matter. The stillness does. The silence stretches awkward, for some sacred for others. You sit down too, not beside the accusers, beside the woman. Jesus doesn't speak until the silence has said enough. Then, without looking up, he says, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone." And then he returns to writing. The rocks begin to fall, not on her, on the ground, one by one. Thud, thud. Then footsteps, sandals turning away. The oldest leave first. Eventually, there is only silence, and Jesus, and her, and you. He looks up, now meets her eyes, not to test her, but to see her. Woman, he says gently, where are they? Has no one condemned you? No one, sir, she whispers. Then neither do I, he replies. Go now and leave your life of sin. But you notice something subtle. He didn't say it first. He didn't begin with correction. He began with calm, with silence, with dust. You let that wash over you. Because in a world quick to throw, quick to judge, Jesus slows down, bends low, writes in the sand until the frenzy loses its fire. And you ask yourself, when conflict rises, do I add noise or do I kneel into calm? There's an old tale told in a worn monastery by the sea. A brother once grew furious with another and sought the abbot's permission to confront him. The abbot said nothing. He simply led the brother to the shore, scooped up a handful of sand, and let it blow slowly from his palm. When anger leaves you as softly as this, he said, then go. You return to the image of Jesus, kneeling in the dust. No thunder, no shouting, just the sand and the silence and the stillness that disarms. Sometimes peace doesn't come from perfect words. Sometimes peace is dust drawn with holy fingers. Jesus stands now, and so does the woman. She looks lighter somehow, not because her past is erased, but because her shame no longer leads the story. You walk beside Jesus again, your eyes glancing to the ground. You notice your own feet, your own dust, the ways you've stood with stones in hand, against others, against yourself. And yet he kneels for you too. He silences your accusers, not with force, but with mercy. And you wonder quietly, can gentleness really protect the soul better than defense? You glance at Jesus. He doesn't look smug. He doesn't look triumphant. He just looks at peace, as if he carries a wellspring within him, always ready to spill calm over chaos. You think of your own moments when your heart surged with reaction, when your voice grew louder than your spirit. What would have happened if you had written in the sand instead? The wind picks up. The square clears. You and Jesus move on the dust settling behind you, but the quiet remains. And maybe tonight, when judgment rises in your mind toward others or toward yourself, you'll stop. You'll kneel. You'll draw in the dust, and you'll let peace answer first. The air is heavier now, not with fear, not with burden, but with the quiet tension of something holy drawing close. You walk beside Jesus as the sun begins to sink toward the edge of the sea. The waves stretch out before you, wide rolling a soft mirror for the sky. You can smell the salt, feel the spray in the breeze, hear the steady crash and retreat of the tide of the Huts. You follow him down to the shoreline. The disciples are already in the boat, their laughter fading into the wind as they begin to row into deeper water. Jesus, for now, stays on shore. He turns to you with a peaceful smile, like someone who knows a secret, but won't say it too early. I'll catch up, he says. And then he walks away, up into the hills, to pray. You sit in the sand, watching the boat grow smaller against the horizon, watching the sun tip lower, setting fire to the sea in hues of orange and gold. Night comes quickly here. Clouds thicken, winds rise. You see it. First, the boat tossed, now struggling. The disciples rowing harder, voices lost in the roar of sudden waves. The peace of sunset has turned into a storm with no warning, and still you wait on the shore until Jesus appears again. Not running, not shouting, just walking on the water. You blink unsure if you're dreaming, but no, he's really walking, calm, steady toward the boat, toward the storm, toward them, and they are terrified, because when fear is high, even peace can look like a ghost. Take courage, he says, it is I. Don't be afraid. The wind seems to pause for a breath, but it's not the storm that calms. First, it's Peter's heart. He steps out onto the waves. He's not fearless. He's just faithful. And for a few sacred seconds, he walks. He actually walks. Not because the sea is still, but because his eyes are on the one who steadies chaos. Then he falters, looks down. The fear returns. The water rises. Lord, save me. And immediately, Jesus reaches out and catches him. Not after a lesson, not with delay. Immediately, you close your eyes, trying to feel it, the hand that catches before the wave crashes. Jesus lifts Peter up, walks him back to the boat, and only then does the wind die down. The sea flattens. The stars reappear, and in the hush, the disciples worship. You sit with that, not the miracle of walking on water, but the deeper truth that peace is not the absence of waves. It's the presence of Christ. You think of the storms you've faced, not always weather. Sometimes worse, waiting for test results, waiting for someone to come home, wondering if a prayer would be heard. And you remember the panic, but you also remember the quiet voice that whispered above it, "Don't be afraid. It is I." There's an old story told among fishermen near the Galilean coast. A child once asked his grandfather how he knew when it was safe to go out into the deeper waters. The old man said, "When I can see the stars reflected in the waves, that's when I know the sky is still watching, even when the sea isn't calm." You look now at the sea beside you. The storm is gone. The sky is clear. And you see it, the stars scattered like diamonds across the black water. And you ask yourself gently, am I waiting for the waves to stop before I believe? Or am I willing to step even when the wind still howls? You glance at Jesus beside you. He's watching the water, a soft smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He knows storms come. He doesn't promise calm seas, but he does promise this, that you will never face them alone. And sometimes that's the real miracle, not walking on water, but knowing you're held even when you sink. So tonight, when fear visits, or when silence feels too deep, too still, too uncertain, remember the sea. Remember Peter. Remember the hand that reached down without hesitation, and whisper back to the storm, "It is I. Don't be afraid." Then breathe. Let your feet rest in the shifting sand. Let the tide rise and fall without needing to fix it. Let Jesus walk across whatever chaos you face and simply say your name. The sea fades behind you. Now, its salty breath lingering on your skin as you follow Jesus inland. The path turns gently upward through rocky terrain, winding past shrubs and thorny brush until it softens again, flattening into a dusty stretch that leads toward an old well. You hear it before you see it, the gentle splash of water deep below. It's midday. The sun is hot overhead, the kind of heat that presses against your shoulders and makes the stones beneath your feet warm to the touch. Jesus stops beside the well and sits. He says nothing at first, just wipes the sweat from his brow with a quiet sigh and rests his back against the stones. You sit too, letting your body settle into the silence. Then you hear footsteps, slow, cautious. A woman approaches, carrying a heavy clay jar. She comes alone. Noon isn't when most draw water, and you sense that's by design. Her eyes are tired, her gait deliberate. She doesn't expect company. Least of all, him. Jesus doesn't move. He waits, not the impatient kind of waiting, the kind that welcomes. "Will you give me a drink?" he asks, surprising her with both gentleness and simplicity. She blinks, unsure. Her voice is wary. "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" Jesus responds not with debate, but with invitation. If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. You sit quietly, watching her face change confusion, softening into curiosity. They talk, not fast, not scripted, but deeply. This is no ordinary conversation. It feels like water itself, moving, cleansing, flowing toward something deeper than words. Jesus tells her things about herself she never shared. Not to shame her, but to show her she is known completely and still loved. And then her voice almost a whisper. "I know that Messiah is coming, and is I the one speaking to you? I am he." You watch her eyes widen, her breath catch her jar slip from her hands. She runs, not from him, but toward something, toward others, toward the truth that love met her in the heat of the day when she was most alone. You stay by the well with Jesus. The breeze picks up slightly, carrying the scent of damp stone and sun-warmed earth. He leans back, closes his eyes, and smiles, as if the moment still echoes inside him. You whisper the question softly to yourself. What if being seen is the first step to being healed? You glance at the well, imagining all the people who passed it by. How many were too hurried, too tired, too ashamed to pause? But this woman stayed. She listened. She received, and everything changed. There's a legend, old and barely remembered, of a village where wells dried up during a long drought. The people feared the land was cursed, but one old man kept drawing water, not from the earth, but from a hidden spring behind his house. When asked how it never ran dry, he said, "Because I never stopped thanking it." You think of that now, of the gratitude that flows when you stop long enough to be filled. Because Jesus didn't rush this encounter. He didn't see a stranger. He saw a soul. And maybe that's the peace you've been thirsting for. Not the absence of trouble, but the presence of someone who sees you and stays. Jesus shifts beside you, stretching his arms across the well stones. It wasn't just about the water, he says gently, eyes still closed. It was about the waiting. You nod. Sometimes the greatest kindness isn't the answer, but the patience before it arrives. You wonder, can I let myself be found in the pauses, in the conversations I didn't expect, in the waiting by a well at noon? The woman returns in the distance, this time with others. Her story is no longer hidden. Her shame undone a grace. Jesus stands to greet them, not as a preacher, but as a host. He gestures for them to sit, to listen, to rest. You stay seated, watching, breathing, and drinking deeply of the truth that peace doesn't always roar like a river. Sometimes it trickles quietly from a well you didn't know was waiting for you. The well and the laughter fade into the distance, and once again you walk beside Jesus. This time, the air feels fresh, washed clean by the early light of a new morning. The kind of light that feels like a second chance. Dew clings to the grass like delicate pearls. Birds call softly from fig trees, and the breeze carries the scent of something warm. Perhaps bread rising somewhere unseen. Jesus walks ahead, slowly, hands folded behind his back. He says nothing, and yet you know exactly where you are. This is the morning after the crowds, after the healings, after the late night prayers and parables. This is what remains when the holy hush settles, when the world has quieted its asking, and the only thing left is the breath between movements. You walk a little slower, sensing the holiness of this moment, not in its action, but in its stillness. You glance over and see a home not far off. A few disciples move about quietly in inside. One gathers leftover baskets. Another pours water for washing. There is no urgency, no pressure, just presence. Jesus stops near a low wall of stacked stones and sits. He picks up a piece of bread left behind on the ledge, breaks it, and takes a small bite. No words, just peace. You sit beside him. This is the part of the story people don't often tell the morning after the miracle. The quiet part. The real part. The part that reminds you that healing, no matter how divine, still asks for recovery. You watch the village slowly wake. A mother calls softly to her child. A door creaks open. The world stretches into the new day, like someone learning to breathe again. And you realize, even after joy, the soul needs rest. You think of how you've sometimes rushed on after good things, after answered prayers, after breakthroughs, as if blessing was only a springboard to more movement. But not here. Here, Jesus rests. Here, renewal includes stillness. He glances over at you and says quietly, "You know healing can exhaust the healer too." You nod. Whether you're the one helping or the one being helped, your body, your spirit, they need time. They need breath. They need to be held in the gentle morning air of grace. There's a lesser-known story passed among early believers in Syria. After Jesus healed a blind man near the city gates, the man returned home and did nothing for 3 days. His neighbors thought him lazy. But when asked, he said, "I have never seen the sun. I am letting it introduce itself." You close your eyes and smile. Sometimes you just need to sit with the miracle. Let it unfold slowly. Let your heart adjust to the brightness of answered prayer. You take a deep breath, feeling the air fill your chest like a promise. Slow down, you hear in your spirit. Let the healing catch up to your heart. Jesus breaks off another piece of bread and hands it to you. You accept it without ceremony. The taste is simple, earthy, perfect. You chew slowly, letting it remind you of the feeding of the woman at the well of the quiet boat, of the tears in Gethsemane. You're beginning to understand something deeper. Rest doesn't just follow the pain. It must also follow the joy, because your soul, like your body, needs time to digest grace. You ask yourself softly, do I allow joy to linger, or do I rush to the next need before the last blessing has settled? Jesus leans back, watching the morning deepen. There's no rush, he says gently, as though he heard your thoughts again. The disciples gather nearby now, preparing to head out. Their voices are calm, their laughter soft. There is work to be done, yes. But for now, the sun is rising, and peace still holds the room. You realize something else. The miracle is not just the healing, but the wholeness that follows. And wholeness needs time, stillness, silence, a walk in the dew. a slow breakfast beside a stone wall, a chance to say thank you, not just with words, but with stillness that honors the gift. You stand now slowly and stretch. Jesus rises too. The sun is warm on your face, and before the day truly begins, you let this moment linger a little longer. No rush, no hurry, just a quiet morning with the one who heals and rests. You leave the quiet morning behind, though its warmth still lingers like the scent of fresh bread on your clothes. The day has moved on, but the peace hasn't left you. It walks with you, tucked gently into your soul, like a folded letter, waiting to be read again later. Now the road dips into the shade of an olive grove. The breeze here is cooler. You walk with Jesus, his footsteps soft on the worn path. Neither of you speaks for a time. It's the kind of silence that isn't awkward. It's sacred. Then he stops, and you realize where you are. The place is simple, a courtyard of sorts, worn stone beneath your feet. The hush of distant conversations. A memory rests in the air, fragile as a candle's flame. Here, a woman once stood surrounded by shame. Not long ago, you can still feel the weight of it in the air. But this moment is different. It's gentler, quieter. Jesus turns to you, his voice low and steady. You remember what I told her. You nod. Go in peace. The words settle over you again, like a blanket draped over your shoulders. It wasn't a sermon. It wasn't a warning. Just mercy. Pure, simple. And then he adds, your sins are forgiven. Not shouted, whispered, and somehow that whisper carried more power than thunder. You sit down on a low stone wall, feeling the texture of the rock beneath your fingers. Rough, real, like the edges of your own story. Forgiveness, you think about it more than you admit. You offer it to others, yes, but to yourself, that's harder. You whisper aloud, is forgiveness really letting go? Or is it learning to be held again? Jesus kneels beside you. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. He says, it's remembering without fear. You breathe in slowly. The olive trees sway gently above you, and you remember a story passed between early believers about a woman named Elpida who would walk every day to a chapel built on the ruins of her childhood home. When asked why she returned to the place where her family had once rejected her, she smiled softly and said, because mercy blooms in old soil. You carry her words like a seed in your pocket. Jesus looks at you, eyes, kind voice, quieter still. You don't need to prove you've changed to be forgiven. He's not asking for an explanation. He already knows. You feel the ache soften in your chest. Forgiveness, you realize, is not a contract. It's a gift, unfolded slowly again and again like light at dawn. And it's not just for the forgiven. it's for the forgiver too. Releasing the burden of holding someone else's debt or your own, you let the thought bloom. Can mercy really heal wounds that time couldn't? Jesus stands brushing dust from his robe. You rise too slower, more aware of your own feet, your own breath. You walk again through the grove, each step easier, lighter. And then he pauses again, just at the edge of the trees. He looks at you, not through you, but into you. You are not your worst day, he says gently. You close your eyes, letting the words find their place inside you. You are not your worst day. You are not your forgotten moment. You are not your old wounds. You are forgiven. He doesn't need to say it again. He already has. The moment you let go of the stone, the moment you looked up from the dust, the moment you sat with him instead of running. As you leave the grove, the light changes. It's softer now, not because the sun has faded, but because your eyes have adjusted to grace. You think of the woman again, who once wept at his feet, wiped them with her hair, poured out a jar of perfume and her entire heart. And you think of yourself, not weeping now, but resting peacefully, knowing you've been met with a forgiveness so gentle it didn't need to shout to be heard. And in that mercy, you begin again. The olive grove fades behind you, replaced now by the sun-dappled slopes of a hillside vineyard. You walk slowly along a path lined with dry stone walls and clusters of grapevines heavy with fruit. The leaves rustle above you like whispered prayers, and the hum of bees rises and falls in rhythm with your steps. Jesus walks a little ahead, trailing his fingers gently across the branches. He doesn't pick anything. He just touches the leaves, the grapes, the soil beneath them, as if greeting old friends. You follow, noticing the simplicity of it all. No urgency, no lesson waiting to be taught. Just presence, just walking. Then, without turning, he speaks. The kingdom of heaven is like a landowner, he begins softly, who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. You smile. Another parable. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and sent them into his vineyard. He continues walking, voice calm and even. About 9 in the morning, he saw others standing around in the marketplace, doing nothing. He told them, "You also go and work in my vineyard, and I will pay you what is right." You know this one. You've heard it before. But it sounds different here among the vines, with the scent of ripening fruit in the air. Jesus tells of how the landowner kept going back at noon, at 3, even at 5 in the afternoon, to gather more workers. And at day's end, he paid them all the same. 1 denarius, the ones who worked all day. 1 denarius, the ones who worked 1 hour. Also 1 denarius. You stop walking. It still feels unfair, doesn't it? But Jesus just smiles. He knows. That's the point. Are you envious because I am generous? He quotes the landowner's words again. You sit on a flat stone by the edge of the vineyard and watch the sunlight spill across the rows of vines. It's quiet again, but full. Generosity often feels unfair, especially when we think we've earned more. But grace was never about fairness. It was always about abundance. And that makes you wonder, do I truly rejoice when others receive mercy? I think I deserved more. You glance up at Jesus, who's now standing at the edge of the vines, holding a small cluster of grapes in his hand. He doesn't eat them. He just looks at them with the kind of tenderness reserved for things that took time to grow. You know, he says, fruit doesn't care how long it took the vine to mature. It ripens anyway. You exhale slowly. That truth lands deep. There's an old story told in quiet villages where wine was pressed by foot and prayer. A vineyard keeper once knelt each evening at the base of his youngest vines, whispering, I believe in what you'll become. The grapes bore fruit 3 years later, sweeter than any he'd tasted. You think of the people you've measured yourself included, by hours worked, by seasons endured, by years wasted or used well. But Jesus doesn't measure that way. In his vineyard, grace is not a reward for time served. It's a gift freely given, even to the ones who showed up just before sunset. You whisper aloud, half in wonder, half in quiet conviction. Can I let grace be grace, even when it doesn't follow my rules? Jesus sits beside you now. He offers you a single grape from the bunch. You take it, press it between your teeth. The skin breaks, and the juice bursts onto your tongue, sweet, rich, alive. And you understand. It's not about fairness. It's about fullness. No one in this vineyard is forgotten. No one is too late. No one is paid less because they wandered longer. All are welcome. All are fed. All are filled. You close your eyes and let that truth rest inside you, like sunlight soaking into the roots. Grace doesn't divide, it multiplies, and the joy of another's welcome is your welcome too. So you rise from the stone dust off your hands and smile toward the far end of the vineyard, where shadows grow long, and the last few are just arriving. And for the first time, you feel no urge to compare, to question, to tally. You just feel thankful to be among the vines, still growing, still ripening, still loved. The vineyard disappears behind you, and now the hills soften into long fields of quiet earth, freshly turned and waiting. The air has cooled again. Evening is near. There's something sacred about this time of day, when shadows grow longer and the world leans in to listen. Jesus walks ahead on a narrow path, and this time he says nothing. You follow. Not because you need to speak, but because you don't. His silence is not distance, it's invitation. Eventually, he stops beneath a tree at the edge of a wide, empty field. The grass is short, wild. The breeze carries the scent of lavender and soil. The sun rests low on the horizon, like it too is preparing to pray. Jesus kneels. You kneel beside him. There is no crowd, no audience, no moment to perform for. Just him and you and prayer. Not the kind of prayer you were taught to get right. Not full of words or perfect sentences. Just breath. Just being. Just the sacred stillness of sitting with God. The hours stretch long. You wait. He waits. There's something different about this. Something ancient. You remember the many times Jesus prayed like this, alone, in the early morning, before others woke, at night, after the miracles, in the wilderness, on mountaintops, in gardens, the Son of God praying to his Father. You feel the weight of that, not heaviness, but holiness. You whisper softly, "Why did you pray when you already knew the Father's heart?" Jesus turns to you, eyes gentle, to stay close. He doesn't need to say more, and you begin to understand. Prayer was never about information. It was about intimacy, being with you, letting time pass with no agenda, letting stillness become presence. You close your eyes and breathe. The quiet grows deeper now. It's not just outside of you, it's within you. A stillness you didn't know you needed. A silence that holds, not isolates. And slowly you realize this is what Jesus did in the unseen hours. Not to escape, but to stay aligned. To keep love at the center. To remember who he was and who the Father is. And maybe that's what you're doing too. There's an old saying whispered among the early church mothers who lived alone in the desert caves. The soul drinks deepest when the mouth is closed. You feel that now. There are no requests in this moment. No questions. Just presence. God's, yours. And somewhere in the middle, a thread of peace, so quiet, it almost feels like still water. You remember again how often Jesus went to lonely places to pray. How he didn't avoid people, but he also didn't avoid solitude. And you wonder gently, have I made enough space in my days to let my soul come home? The last rays of sun stretch across the earth like a hand reaching out. Jesus rises slowly, but you stay a moment longer. You feel the ground beneath you, solid, holy. You whisper something, not to be heard, but to be felt. Here I am, that's all. Here I am, and somehow that's enough. Jesus doesn't rush you. He never does. He simply walks a few steps ahead and waits. You rise, not hurried, but whole. And as you walk again, step by step, the world feels quieter. Not because it has changed, but because you have. You carry the silence with you now, not as emptiness, but as presence, as prayer, as peace. You walk now into a different kind of silence, a heavier one. The path has turned rocky and narrow, holds a strange stillness, as if creation itself is holding its breath. You feel it before you see it. The tomb, set in a garden, hewn from the side of a hill. The stone that once sealed it sits to the side, still and unmoving. Birds do not sing here. No breeze rustles the leaves. Even the light feels hushed. You stand at the entrance. Jesus is not beside you now, but he was here, and that changes everything. You step forward slowly. The inside of the tomb is cool. The air is damp and clean, like something freshly emptied. You trace your hand along the stone. It is not a place of decay anymore. It is a place of stillness, transformed. And in that stillness, something begins to stir inside you. Not noise, not emotion, but an awareness, a reverence. Like when you realize you're not alone in a room, and someone holy has already been there. This is where he rested, after the cross, before the rising, between agony and glory. And this was rest. You sit near the entrance, just inside the shade, and let yourself feel what it must have been like that day. The silence of Saturday. The long pause of uncertainty. The world caught between breath. So much of life feels like that, doesn't it? Waiting, not knowing, the in-between. And yet here in this quiet hollow of rock and faith, you realize something sacred. God entered rest too, not as defeat, but as fulfillment. Jesus, who calmed storms, healed wounds, and raised the dead, also laid still. By choice, you let that settle. The Savior of the world knew what it meant to stop, to wait, to trust that the story was still being written, even in the silence of stone. There's a story whispered among the oldest Christian communities in Ethiopia of a boy who once fell asleep inside an abandoned cave during a thunderstorm. He woke to find a strange calm, a voice echoing from the walls that simply said, "Even darkness is mine." The boy never spoke of it again, but he walked differently from that day forward, like someone who knew that even in shadows, God is near. You think of that now, because this tomb, it's not a place of despair. It's a witness to stillness that held eternity. And you wonder gently, can I trust that God is at work, even when everything feels still and silent? You let the question breathe, because maybe it's in the tomb, when everything looks paused, that the most divine things unfold. Transformation rarely announces itself with noise. It blooms in silence, in the hidden, in the waiting. You close your eyes and imagine Jesus here, not in pain, but at peace. His work finished, his body resting, his spirit not absent, but active in mystery beyond your understanding. You whisper softly, almost involuntarily, "You rested here," and the stillness answers not with sound, but with presence. There is no fear here now, no sting, only promise. only pause. Only the echo of a stone rolled away. You rise and step back into the light. The garden outside is blooming, quietly, steadily, as if it too knew he would rise. And as you walk away, you do not feel heavy. You feel ready to wait when waiting is needed, to rest when the story is unfolding in silence, to trust when you do not yet see the morning. You do not rush. You do not speak. You simply walk with the peace of a soul that has seen the tomb and knows it is no longer the end. You are walking along the edge of the sea again, but it feels different this time, gentler, like the end of a long story. The sand is cool beneath your feet, the sky painted in the soft colors of morning. You hear the quiet lapping of waves, the soft cry of gulls overhead, and far off the sound of a small fire crackling. You see Jesus there on the shore. He's tending the fire. The smoke curls upward, steady and fragrant. You smell something familiar, bread warming on the coals and fish cooking slowly. The scent is both earthy and comforting, like the memory of a childhood meal, long forgotten, but deeply missed. He turns and sees you. "Come and have breakfast," he says. His voice is quiet, but not distant. It carries the softness of someone who knows you're tired, not just in body, but in soul. You walk toward him. The disciples are already there, sitting, resting. No one is rushing. No one is explaining. They're just present, held by the silence of restoration. Jesus hands you a piece of bread, still warm. Then fish. He doesn't speak a sermon. He doesn't remind anyone of past failures. He simply serves. This is the moment after the resurrection, after the denials, after the running and returning. And still, he feeds them. He feeds you. You take the bread in your hands and eat slowly, quietly. It's a sacred thing, this breakfast, the kind that tastes like healing. You remember Peter, how not long before this, he denied Jesus 3 times. The shame of that echoing in every corner of his soul. But now Jesus turns to him, not with anger, not with disappointment, but with a question. Do you love me? Peter says yes 3 times, and Jesus restores him, not with punishment, but with purpose. He does not cancel the one who fell. He calls him again. You glance down at your own hands. You think of all the times you've stumbled, walked away, grown cold. And yet, here you are, still invited, still welcomed, still fed. There's a story told in the ancient church of a man named Myron, who after a lifetime of wandering was found weeping outside the door of a chapel he had once vandalized in his youth. The priest didn't scold him. He opened the door wide and simply said, "Come in. We've kept your seat." You think of that now, because that's what this fire by the sea feels like a seat kept warm for you. Jesus doesn't ask you for perfection. He asks you for love. Do you love me? He might ask again. And you can answer, not with certainty or eloquence, but with quiet truth. Yes, Lord. You know that I do, and maybe that's enough, more than enough. The morning sun rises higher, now golden light catching on the water, like diamonds scattered across the waves. You look at Jesus, calm, kind, strong, and you know he's not finished with you. Restoration, it seems, is not just being forgiven. It's being given back your place, your name, your calling, and it happens quietly, over breakfast, by a fire, in the stillness of love that does not flinch when it sees your whole story. You finish your bread slowly. You rise not because he tells you to, but because something in your heart is standing again, steady, washed, known. He walks with you a little way down the shoreline, the sand soft beneath your feet, the breeze cool and full of life. He doesn't tell you what comes next. He doesn't need to, because peace doesn't always come from knowing the path. Sometimes it just comes from knowing who walks beside you. And tonight, you carry that truth like a light in your chest. You are restored. You are loved. You are not alone. And now, dear one, let the story begin to fade like the final echo of waves after the tide has gone out. Let the fire beside the shore grow dim in your memory, its warmth still tucked inside you. Let the sandals fall from your tired feet and stretch your toes into the cool sand of rest. Breathe slowly. The wind has calmed. The sea has stilled. The teacher has walked with you through gardens and storms, crowds and caves, vineyards and tombs. He has knelt with you in dust, whispered peace into your storms, and waited beside you in silence. He has not hurried, and neither must you. Let your shoulders drop now. Let your breath slow. Let the warmth of his presence wrap around you like a soft blanket drawn up to your chin by invisible loving hands. Let your thoughts drift like leaves on still water. Nothing is required of you right now. No doing, no striving, only this, to rest in the arms of the one who knows your whole story and loves you still. The one who speaks gently in the silence. The one who calls you friend. So close your eyes. Lay down your fears. Unclench your heart. You have walked far tonight, and now it is time to sleep. You are safe. You are held. You are home.